Let's get some batch cooking meal prep ready today for all those cozy fall and winter meals that we love so much. Welcome to Herb Reserve. I'm Carter. Let's get started. Today we're going to do one of my favorite types of meal prep. Now this one that we're doing today can either be prepared for the freezer or it can be canned. So I'm going to put mine on the shelf, which means essentially I'm going to do the cooking in the pressure canner. But you can very easily take the exact same recipe, put it in an Instapot, just put it on the stove top, put it in a slow cooker, and turn it into 7 meals as well. This is 4 cups, this is 4 cups, so you can have 7 of these in your freezer, and then you're ready to go. You can make soups and stews and all kinds of wonderful things. So let me show you what we have going into this. I have some stew beef from Costco. That was almost $28. I have 3 decent sized onions. I have a little bit of the beef bouillon. If you don't have this on stock, that's no big deal. You can use, one of those boxes of beef broth or onion broth. You could even use vegetable broth if that's what you prefer. You can also just use a bouillon cube. It's a flavor thing. I wouldn't put just water in there because then the flavor, not only is nothing added in terms of flavor, but it kind of dilutes what flavor there is in there. So I like to do something like this. I'm going to add a little salt and pepper. These are not necessary for preservation. If you're going to be canning, they're certainly not necessary if you're freezing. In fact, if you're freezing, you can change up anything you want in this. You could go ahead and add some thickener. You can put potatoes in. You can do whatever you want if you're freezing. You don't have to worry about canning safety. So I'm going to use some Worcestershire sauce. If you don't like this or you're gluten-free, you can use some coconut aminos. You can use some tamari. You can use like a steak sauce. Primal Kitchen steak sauce is gluten-free. And then I'm going to use some balsamic vinegar. It really deepens the flavor. And then for the really fun part, I have a bunch of tomatoes here. This is about 3 pounds. I don't think I'm going to use that many. I'll probably use 2 pounds of tomatoes. And then I have a bunch of garlic that I will prepare. So the best part of all of this is the flavor that you get out of this. I am going to roast my tomatoes and my onions and my garlic, and it adds so much flavor. So even if you're going to do all your cooking today in a crock pot or whatever, prepare it for the freezer, I would still go to the extra effort to roast the vegetables just because of the depth of flavor. It's so good. But again, you don't have to. In fact, even if you're canning, you don't have to do that. But that's what I'm going to do. So that's how I'll show you. I want to show you how this is going to turn out when you're done. This is that. Let me see if I can get it. You can see the meat chunks in there. The way we're going to cut it and mix it up, they're going to remain as meat chunks rather than just turning immediately into shredded beef. You can see the tomatoes, you can see the onions. So there's so many different things you can do with this. One of my favorites is just to eat it like pot roast. Pour it over some noodles or some rice or some mashed potatoes, however you eat your pot roast. You could turn it into a beef stew if you have some potatoes and carrots laying around that need to be used. You could turn it into a beef vegetable soup with a bag of frozen vegetables and maybe even some frozen potatoes. You can turn it into a shepherd's pie. Add again those frozen vegetables, maybe some corn. That would be delicious. Ooh, some leftover mashed potatoes. That's one of the things we use this for often is after Thanksgiving, when my kids keep saying, oh, bake more mashed potatoes, and Thanksgiving Day comes and goes and the turkey's all gone and the dressing's all gone and the cranberry sauce is gone and the gravy's gone and I have mashed potatoes left. Great starter for making a shepherd's pie. But let me just make sure that I mention right up front, because I may forget later, we don't put any thickeners in this if we're going to can it. You can use thickeners now if you're going to put it in the freezer, but if you're going to can it, use your thickeners when you open it up and get ready to serve. So I'm going to show you a picture. I did just that the other day. We had it served pot roast style, but I thickened up the gravy just a little bit over some pasta. So I have some pictures of that. I'll show you in a little bit. It's fantastic. I hope you enjoyed as much as I do. It's going to put 7 meals either in your freezer or on your shelf that are so quick to throw together. When I did this as pot roast the other day, this was ready to go before the pasta water was even heated up. Literally, it is such an easy, quick thing to do, especially when it's chilly outside and gets dark a little earlier and you come home tired and it's, you know, it's like, oh, for heaven's sakes, I don't want to cook today, but I do want something healthy and homemade. This is my answer to that problem. All right, I'm gonna get started chopping these tomatoes. Move everything out of my way here. So I have my oven preheating to 425. I'm gonna roast the tomatoes, the onions, and the garlic. I have a sheet pan with parchment paper. I do that just because I don't like, you know, pulling sticky stuff off my pans, but it's not necessary. I'm gonna start with the onions and the garlic. Actually, I'm gonna do the garlic first because I wanna keep it all in one section of the pan because I will pull that off and smash it, or chop it up rather, because I will pull that off and chop it up before I put it into the mix. I'll smash it on the pan and then chop it before I put it into the mix. I don't use any oil in this. I don't seem to need it, but if you'd like to use some oil, if that makes you feel better, you can do that. I'm using 14, 15 cloves of garlic. I'm gonna get 7 quarts. So I figured 2 good sized cloves of garlic per quart is probably a good number for us. If you don't like garlic as much as we do, you can certainly use less. If you don't like it at all, you don't have to use any. And if you like it a lot, you can use more. Today, this is gonna go in with raw beef. So my cooking is gonna be done in the pressure canner. If you're gonna cook it for the freezer, you want to actually cook the whole thing today. You're gonna save time. Because today, you know, if you're doing it in the slow cooker, it may take 8 to 10 hours in the slow cooker, very little work from you, but that's only once you have to do that. You don't have to plan ahead, you know, on the morning before you want to eat it and get everything out and ready and into the slow cooker. That all the hard part, all the time consuming part, all the real depth of flavor is already going to be in your freezer. So I'm going to smash these. Well, 3 days ago, it was 96 degrees where I am. Definitely not feeling like fall. Yesterday, I think our high was 73. It was feeling great. I harvested the sweet potatoes. The weather's great. The temperatures at night are going down to about 50. A little bit of chill in the air when I get up and walk the dog in the morning. My favorite time of year. But it starts me thinking about cozy food. So I was looking at my pantry, and I don't really have any cozy food left from last year in terms of already mostly cooked for me, right? So I don't have any soups or stews. I don't have any of these kind of meal starters. So I'm gonna be doing a lot of that to get ready for fall and winter. I don't do, you know, you can certainly put beef stew on the shelf. I tend not to do that because I like the flexibility of this. Now, if I'm gonna do chicken something, there's a little bit less flexibility for the meals we like to eat. So I may add some flavors that really go ahead and start to take it in the direction I'm gonna go. But with this, I could do so many different things with it. Whereas if I have potatoes in here, it's not really gonna ever be Texas chili, right? So this is the way I like to do it, and then I can have whatever I want. My husband says, oh, let's have some beef stew. That's a piece of cake. If he'd rather have chili, that's easy. If he'd rather have shepherd's pie, he better hope I have some leftover mashed potatoes in the fridge. But then that's easy. My favorite way personally is to just have it as pot roast. It is, I think it's delicious. So the package of beef that I have is about 5.5 pounds. And we're gonna do 7 quart-sized containers. So what is that? Somebody do the math for me. Maybe 13 ounces or so of beef per jar or per freezer container. So if you wanted to extend that out and turn it into beef stew or beef vegetable soup or something like that, you could easily feed 4 people dinner. If you do it like pot roast, you know, I don't know, maybe my husband and I can just eat a lot, but usually I have 1 leftover serving after the 2 of us eat of that. So we don't need a whole lot of noodles or rice or anything on the base. It's mostly just the package of meat and veggies and a little bit of noodles. So this whole, even if we have noodles, we're looking at less than $5 for us to have dinner for 2 plus a leftover serving the next day. So dinner for 3 or 4, maybe $5 for the whole thing. You know, this day and time, that's pretty amazing, I think. Peeling and chopping onions and garlic is like one of my least favorite chores. I don't know why. It's not that it's difficult, it's just, it's messy, and the garlic is sticky, and onions make me cry, so I guess all that explains why I don't like it so much. All right, I'm gonna get the onions chopped up, and I'm gonna do a very rough, I'm gonna bring you down here actually. Okay, that's much better. So I'm gonna do a very rough chop on these onions. I want them to be chunky still because we are going to pressure can them. So those are my chunks. So you'll still know that there is onion in there, but it's about the right size to be just fine to fit on a spoon or a fork. Ugh, onions make me cry. Right, so that pan is ready to go in the oven. I'm going to go ahead and get it in while I chop up the tomatoes. So I'll keep my garlic over here so I can pull that off and really dice it up before I put it in the mixture. All right, let's get some tomatoes going now. I'm just gonna chop off the tip. Could core them, but that takes more time, I think. Been watching a lot of people lately not cut off the core. I don't know, so clearly it's not necessary, but I like to have that out of there. It drives me nuts when you buy a can of diced tomatoes and you've got, you know, one section that is like just that. Why? So what else should we make for the pantry for this fall and winter? What are the cozy foods do you have? I'm going to turn all of these, you can't see it right now. I'm going to turn all of these tomatoes over so that the juice drains out and the top gets a little blistered. I'm going to use my skins. These are organically grown tomatoes. They've been cleaned, but if you're not sure about if your tomatoes were sprayed or you just don't like the taste or feel of skin in your meals, feel free to skin them. Once they come out of the oven, it's so easy to peel off the skin, so it won't take you but, I don't know, 5 minutes to do that if you'd like. I like the flavor that we get from the skins. A little bit deeper, a little bit richer. So if you're going to cook this today for the freezer, you're going to do it in a pressure cooker. You know, honestly, I have one of those Instant Pots, but I just never use it. So I don't know how long it is there, but you would do it for, I don't know, for stew or for meat, whatever the timing they give you is. This is basically chuck roast, this beef that we're using. So you really want to cook it down until it's very tender. Now I'm going to do kind of a special technique with it today because I want it to be fall apart tender, but I don't necessarily want it to fall apart right when I pull it out of the jar, right? Like shredded beef. So if I just can beef by itself, that's the way it comes out of the jar. This tomato has little dimples, so I'm gonna make sure I cut around those. Good. These are homegrown tomatoes that I picked green, and they've been ripening on my dining room table for a while. But I was in Publix, which is our grocery store here, yesterday, and I happened to look at their Roma tomatoes, their paste tomatoes like these are, and they are $1.29 a pound right now here at my local Publix. So even if you have to buy your tomatoes, we're talking 3 pounds, so $4 worth of tomatoes. I did buy my onions. I bought them at Costco, so it was $1.75 for my onions. This is a very, very low cost meal. It's a great way if you're gonna do beef stew, vegetable soup, just to use up what you have in your fridge that's gonna go bad. Maybe you have some leftover spinach in there, you have some cabbage, you have some carrots, you have some corn, you know, whatever you have. It's just, this is just so easy, so flexible. See, some of these aren't even perfectly ripe yet, but that's where the roasting comes in so handy. It just really makes them taste like they're perfectly ripe. All right, I'm gonna do one more. I think that'll put me about 2 to 2.5 pounds of tomatoes. Okay. These are gonna go into the roaster just like that. I'm not adding oil or salt or anything. So it'll probably take them 30 minutes. So that's what I have left. So 2.25 pounds is what I used. All right, let's get this meat chopped up. Now, if I'm just gonna can beef, straight beef, raw pack, I do not chop it up from here because it comes out shredded beef. But I want it to come out in little bite-sized pieces, as you saw in here. I hope you can see that. I can see it perfectly, but I don't know if you can. So that they hold together in case, oh, another thing, stroganoff is really, really good with this. I know that you don't normally put tomatoes in stroganoff, but I find it delicious. I'm gonna deal with raw meat. I always put down a plastic sheet on top of my board. All right, here's my meat. Okay, bite-sized pieces, that's all I'm doing. And I'm putting them, let me see if you'll be able to see this, in that bowl right there. And that's where we'll mix in the tomatoes and onions and garlic. Once we get this going, I'll show you a picture of my dinner the other night. I wish you could smell it. It just smells divine. If you like pot roast, you will love this, even if you don't use it as pot roast. The smell, the flavors, the texture, it's like pot roast. So we had some of this, as I said the other night, took no time to put it together. And that's my goal with this. I don't necessarily want everything all done and then I'm, gonna microwave it or whatever. Or heat up the whole thing and wait for the potatoes to go all the way through. I just want to be ready to go. Great way to use leftovers. Gosh, a lot of this is already bite size. So we're gonna mix this with the liquids and the vegetables and coat it really well in all of that. And that is going to keep it from sticking together and coming out as shredded beef. I'll help it hold its shape. Now, not for everything do I not want. Now, I don't want, cubes of beef in everything, right? I mean, you could even turn this into beef burritos, and I would definitely want it to be shredded for that. But for pot roast, I like it to come out kind of in chunks, but to be tender enough to shred immediately. For chili, if you're gonna do a Texas chili, they like to use the chuck roast, which this is. And I want some chunks in it, and I want a little bit of shredded in there. So now I can have both. Texas chili, there's traditionally not beans, but if you must add beans, you can certainly add beans. Makes it a much heartier meal, serve more people. You could turn it into like a chili mac kind of thing. Right, my beef is all chopped up and ready to go. I wanted to mention that the past couple of times I've been in Costco looking for stew meat, there's only been one package in the store. One, that's it. It used to be that they had a dozen packages of it. But anyway, if you should get to the store, whatever store you're going to, and you don't see stew meat, a chuck roast is absolutely fine. So it's essentially the same meat. And it will cook up the exact same way. So I wanted to tell you, I went ahead and pulled out my garlic because I had put this pan with the garlic and onions on the bottom. And it was starting to get a little tasty on the bottoms for me. So I went ahead and pulled that out. Onions and tomatoes are still in there. But I'm gonna get this chopped up and we're gonna get the rest of our meat mixture prepared. So I'm gonna get the garlic chopped up and into the meat, and then we'll get the rest of the meat mixture going. All right. Oh, this smells so good. Very mellow now that it's been roasted. Let's get the meat prepped. All right, I have my garlic in there. I'm gonna go ahead and put in some salt and pepper. Remember, I'm making 7 jars, so I'm gonna use a tablespoon of salt. I know that sounds like a lot. It did to me. I had to rethink that. But that's like the equivalent of half a teaspoon of salt per jar. So if you don't want to use it, you certainly don't need to use it. But I like it. And then I'm going to do the same thing with pepper. This is all going to get mixed around here in a minute. Now, Worcestershire sauce. I'm going to use about half a cup. Again, it's for 7 quarts. So we're really talking about just over a tablespoon per quart. All right, there we go. And I'm going to do the same thing with the balsamic vinegar. Oh, I hate these lids. So about half a cup. This is good for salad dressing, but it's very difficult with that little, can you see that? That little thing on there. To really get serious about pouring out some balsamic vinegar. Maybe there's a trick to it and I just don't know. Come on. You can feel free to do this to taste. If you don't think you want as much balsamic vinegar, maybe you want a lower sugar vinegar, you can use red wine vinegar. You could even use red wine. Come on. Man, that's a frustrating one. All right. Can you hear all the drilling downstairs? I'm sorry about that. It's my husband working on my canning pantry. So I try not to complain about the noise too much. Okay, now I'm gonna mix this up. I want all the meat coated with everything, not only to infuse the flavor, but to keep the meat in separate chunks as it cooks. It's heavy, 5.5 pounds of meat, it's heavy. It smells heavenly, I have to tell you. All right, so that's how we look, all mixed up. I'm gonna check on those vegetables. Okay, they're my roasted tomatoes. Don't they look delicious? So I'm gonna get those onions another couple of minutes while we get these tomatoes in here. There's another great thing about having a meal prepped on the shelf or the freezer. That you don't have to make this massive mess every time. You only do this once. That alone is worth it to me. Maybe I'm just extra messy in the kitchen, but I tell you what, there's always so much to clean. Okay, so let's start to get these in here. So if you take them out of the oven and you want to remove the skins, let them cool off first. Not only will it make it easier, but you won't burn your fingers. As I said, I'm leaving the skins on in mine. Roasted onions, just a little bit roasted on the tips. That'll be just fine. I have plenty of time to cook in the pressure canner or in the Instant Pot or slow cooker or whatever you plan to use. All right, so I'm just going to slide those right on top. If I stand too close to that. All right. Start to mix this up. So I like to have this all mixed together in the jar. So rather than layering it in, if we were just doing everything completely raw, vegetables included. Okay. Oh, I wish you could smell this. I know the meat's still raw, but boy, does that smell good. All right. So if you were going to cook this now and then freeze it, you could go ahead and put that in your slow cooker, your Instant Pot, pot on the stove, however you want to do it. And you would cook the meat until it's tender. So in a slow cooker, that may be 8 to 10 hours. On the stove, that may be 6 hours. In an Instant Pot, I don't know how long that takes. So somebody tell me down below, just a little direction for those folks who want to use an Instant Pot. My jars are cold because I know it was steaming a minute ago, but because the liquids and the meat were cold, those vegetables are not hot anymore. My canner has just room temperature water in it. You're doing any type of canning, you want to make sure that everything is basically the same temperature so that we don't have any crackage on the jars. See, now this one other thing I want to note, if I were packing this raw pack, the meat releases its own juices, so I would fill it up with meat to the 1 inch mark. This one, I'm going to add some liquid to it. The meat will still release some juices, but it will sink down. So I normally do about 1 1/4 inches. So this one was done, it started at 1 1/4 inches. It's actually because the meat has reduced down in size as it released its liquid. It's actually lost just a little bit. So maybe 1/4 inch it lost, and that's actually perfect. I don't want it too full because I don't want any siphoning happening. I don't want to risk not getting a seal. But if you do have a jar that doesn't seal, just stick it in the refrigerator and now you have tomorrow night's dinner ready. Not so bad. All right, I have my funnel. I'm going to start, make this a little easier on the debubbling side of things. I'm going to start by pouring a little bit of the broth in each jar. Maybe 1/4 cup, 2 or 3 tablespoons, maybe, not much. May need to make a little more broth at the end, we'll see. I'll put all of this in there. All right, now if I need to make any more, I will. It's super easy. Now let's get the meat loaded up. There is actually quite a bit of juice in here from the, well, not juice I suppose, but liquid in here from the balsamic and the Worcestershire. So I will try to divide that up among the jars at the end. Let's get the solids in first. I'm gonna try to make these roughly even. So we'll start with that and move around. Sorry about all the sawing down there. It'll all be worth it in the end. I'm excited. I've been monitoring the temperature down there for about a year now, just to see if it was really going to be safe for my canned food, for my basically root cellar type items. Sweet potatoes, onions, squash, that kind of thing. I should say winter squash. And in the summer, it seems to stay below 72, and the humidity is about 60–65%. And in winter, it seems to stay about 67 degrees, and the humidity is in the 50 to 55 range in the winter. So I know that maybe it's not perfect for a root cellar year-round, but I think it's good enough. I don't store enough, potatoes and sweet potatoes and things to last a year. I just really want to get through most of the winter if I can. I have a bunch canned, and that'll take care of the rest. Just did it. All right, let's debubble. Now this is one of those things you're not supposed to do here. There's a metal utensil. Normally I would use a plastic fork or knife in a quart-sized jar, but these are just too deep to use that, so I'm gonna just be very careful not to bang my knife against the side of the jar or the rim of the jar. Make sure I have no air pockets down in there. There's a touch more liquid in a couple of these. I'm just going to add a little bit of water. All right, now I'm gonna wipe the rims. I can see several spots where I have made a mess. I didn't say at the beginning, by the way, these are clean jars. They've actually just come out of the dishwasher. They don't actually need to be sterilized anymore. If you're going to can something, if you're gonna pressure can it, it doesn't need to be sterilized at all. If you're gonna water bath can, if you're gonna do it for more than 10 minutes, you don't need to sterilize it anymore. Oh, this jar is a particular mess. I'm gonna can these because they're quarts, yuck, for an hour and a half. If you were doing pint-sized jars, so you're just cooking for one person or you just want it for lunches or whatever, and do it in pint-sized jars, it would be an hour and 15 minutes. So we're basically cooking to the time of the longest cooking item, which is the beef. Now, let's get some, they're new lids. Put them on here. Do it till it catches, and then just a little bit farther. One of the biggest mistakes I think new canners make is they screw on that lid so tight because they're afraid something's gonna come out. The problem is, you want something to come out, right? You want that air to come out. So you don't want to do it so tight that the air can't release and essentially give you a vacuum seal inside the jar, which is what it's doing. So just tight enough. There we go. You'll know if you put it on too tight when it comes out and the lid is all crinkled up and looking funny. That is, that's a jar you want to put in the refrigerator and use within a day or two. It's time to put these in the canner. I'm going to put them in a cold canner. It's room temperature, cold water is fine. These jars are room temperature. I mean, there's no heat at all in them. So they're ready to go. We'll bring it up very slowly to temperature, and then I'll start to crank it up a little bit more as it gets closer. Steam starts to come out. We'll give it 10 minutes to vent the steam from the canner. Then I'll put the jiggler on, and once it starts jiggling, we'll start our timer. So I'll see you back when that starts. So I'm going to jump in right here and show you what this looks like when it comes out of the jar. This in the picture right now is straight out of the jar and into the pan. I'm going to heat it up a little bit, and then I'm going to thicken it up a little bit, which you'll see in just a second. And we're just going to eat it tonight as pot roast, just on top of noodles. So it's not a beautiful display, but it sure is tasty. So you can still see the chunks of meat, which is what I wanted. The canner has started steaming, so I'll let it release the steam for 10 minutes. All right, we have been venting for 10 minutes now, so I'm going to put the weight on. I have the All-American canner, so it is a weighted gauge canner. I don't know if you're really going to be able to see this on camera, but there is a 10-pound mark, a 15-pound mark, and a 5-pound mark. Because I am below 1,000 feet above sea level, I use 10 pounds. When we lived in Atlanta, I was above 1,000 feet, so I used 15 pounds. So you'll have to check your altitude and then decide which one of those you're going to need. I don't know who, if anybody, uses 5 pounds, but I am 10. So I'm going to put the 10. You really can't see that, I'm sorry. I'm gonna put the tin over this. There we go. And that'll start jiggling in just a minute. The canner has now built up the pressure and it's starting to jiggle. So I wanted to get it to the right number of jiggles so that you could hear what you want to hear on your own canner. So we'll hear one in just a second. There's one jiggle. Take a break. Got at least one more jiggle in the next minute. There it is. All right, we're good to go. I'm gonna set the timer for an hour and a half, and we're gonna let it process, and then I'm gonna turn the temperature off of the stove, and we're gonna let it cool down. So that'll probably be 45 minutes before we even open the canner. Okay, our beef meal starter is ready to come out of the canner. It smells so good in here. 7 quarts we'll put on the shelf. Thanks so much for joining me today. And if you enjoyed this video, I think you're really gonna like this one. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.